Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't hide. When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. 'Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you I give it one more try. Turn away and wrestle with my doubts. Oh, I leave them all behind, but don't know how. Bury my head deep within the crowd, but I'm reaching for your hand to pull me out. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times?
Okay.
You can see straight through my life.
Here we go. All right. Where are we at? All right. I am going to do my best to read 2 chapters tonight. Because all of that first 9 chapters were one day. Now, chapter 10, chapter 11 are day 2, and chapter 12, 13, and the epilogue are day 3. So if we do that, we can be finished with this book and move on. And I kind of want to do that. So here we go. Chapter 10. This is the beginning of day 2 in the book. A squad of 6 Imperial fighters, bent wing interceptors, zoomed overhead, the hum of their engines drowning out and throttling Zirid's and Aaron's laughter. The bent panels of the fighters' wings formed parentheses around the central fuselage. That doesn't look right, Zirid said. Imperial ships over Coruscant? No, Aaron said, it doesn't. Zirid looked higher up in the sky, trying to spot any sign of his destroyed ship. He saw nothing. Fat Man had served him well and nearly gotten them away from the cruiser. He smiled, thinking that Engspice addicts all over Coruscant would soon go through withdrawal. Excuse me. But after those few days of torture, they'd have freedom, should they choose it. Zirid felt a peculiar sense of freedom, too. He had not delivered spice. That pleased him. In a way, the Empire had freed him from his treadmill, had destroyed it in a hail of plasma fire. Of course, the Exchange would try to kill him. He'd have to contend he'd have that to contend with. What are you thinking? Aaron said. I'm thinking about Ara, he answered, as the weight of his situation overburdened the relief he felt at surviving a fall of 50 clicks. The man who had stood beside the Sith Lord on the bridge of the cruiser had been the same man that Zirid had seen back at Carson's Park on Volta, the same man who had led the ambush on him and Aaron in the spaceport. Vrath Zizor. Orin had named him. Vrath knew about Ara and Nat. And if Vrath decided for some reason to share that information with the exchange, Orin would order more than just Zirid's death. They'd make an example of him and his family. He sat up with a grunt. I have to get back to Volta, now. Aaron sat up beside him. She must have felt the fear in him, because of the man on the cruiser? Zirid nodded. He knows about Ara. I don't understand why. No one in my work knows that I have a daughter, Aaron. They'd use her against me if they did. Hurt her. But now he knows. He saw me in the park with her. I talked to him. He put his face in his hands. Aaron put a hand on his back. Zirid. He shook it off and climbed to his feet. I have to get back. How? He shook his head. I don't know, but I'm going. I owe you for saving me. I won't forget that, but... She held up a hand. Wait. Just wait. Think it through, Zirid. They're going to let him leave, this man who knows about your daughter. No one has gotten off Coruscant. They're not going to let him leave, this man who knows about your daughter. No one has gotten off Coruscant since the attack, and no one will until the peace negotiations are concluded and the planet's disposition decided. They'll keep him on the cruiser or ground him on the planet. He's not going anywhere. Zirid considered the words. They made sense. His heart continued to pound, but slower. He's here, you think? Possibly. Maybe even likely. But he's not returning to Volta. At least, not yet. Zirid knew that Vrath already could have told someone else about Ara, but he thought it unlikely. No one gave away leverage. It was like giving away credits. No, Vrath had kept it to himself. Maybe to sell to the exchange, maybe to use later, but he hadn't used it yet. He'd had to get to Coruscant from Volta too fast. He must have left immediately after the ambush. Why didn't he use Ara against you back on Volta? Aaron asked. Could have forced you to turn over the cargo. Zirid didn't know. Maybe he would have. Maybe that was him in the stairwell of the apartment complex yesterday. Maybe we frightened him off, or maybe he didn't have time. He had to follow me to ensure he could locate the spice. If he'd have grabbed Ara, he might have lost me, or I might have flown off with the spice without ever knowing he had her. Aaron said nothing as Zirid let his thoughts meander into the briar patch of the criminal underworld. Maybe he just couldn't hurt a child, Aaron said. Maybe, Zirid said, but did not believe it. He hadn't met many criminals who operated with any kind of ethical code. Listen, Aaron said, I'll help you get off the planet, or find him here, but first I need to get to the temple. You came here to kill someone, Aaron. I cannot spare that kind of time. Her face flushed, and he saw some inner battle going on behind her eyes. I can just identify him, she said, as if trying to convince herself. I can find him another time, but I must have his name. This may be my only chance. She blew a deep breath. I would welcome your help. Been real useful so far, he said. You got me here. I got us blown out of space, and yet here we are. And here we are. Let me get a name, and then I'll help you get off planet. Agreed? He made up his mind, nodded. All right, I'm with you, but we have to do this fast. Malgus waited for Alina to awaken, his mind moving through possibilities, still trying to square a circle. He was beginning to think it could not be done. Alina emerged from the bedroom of his quarters, barely covered in a light shirt and her undergarments. As always, her beauty struck him, the grace of her movement. She smiled. How long did I sleep? Not long, he said. She poured tea for both of them and sat on the floor near his feet. I have something I need you to do, he said. Name it. You will take several shuttles to Coruscant. 10 members of my security team, Imperial soldiers, will accompany you. In his head, he had already picked the men. Kurtz's squad. Men whose discretion he knew he could trust. He continued, I will give you a list. She sipped her tea, leaned her head against his calf. What will be on this list? Names and locations, mostly. Some technology and its location. He had pulled it all from the Imperial database while she had been sleeping. What do you want me to do? Find everyone and everything you can on this list and bring it to this ship. She sat up straight, looked up at him. The question was in the pool of her eyes. The people are to be made prisoners, he said. The technology confiscated as spoils of war. The question did not leave her eyes. She gave it voice. Why me, beloved? Why not your Sith? He ran his hand over her left leku, and she closed her eyes in pleasure. Because I know I can trust you, he said, but I'm not yet entirely sure whom else I can trust, not until things progress a bit further. She opened her eyes and pulled away from him. Concern creased her forehead. Progress further? Are you in danger? Nothing that I cannot deal with, but I need you to do this. She leaned back into him, her arm draped over his legs. Then I will do it. The smell of her clouded his thoughts, and he fought for clarity. Tell no one else of this. Report it only as a routine transfer of cargo. I will, but why are you doing all of this? Oh, I think we just went into an ad. I'm simply taking precautions. Go, Elena. Now? Now. She rose, bent, and kissed first his left cheek, then his right. I will see you soon. What are you going to do while I'm gone? He was going to disobey Angral's orders yet again and return to Coruscant. I am going hunting. Okay. I know I'm kind of pausing because I don't know. I want to make sure everybody can hear all of this. The ad's almost over. Okay, here we go. That should be the end of the ad. The smell of smoke and melted plastoid hung thick in the air. Aaron and Zira picked their way on foot through the streets and auto walks of Coruscant. Aaron was conscious of the fact that level after level of urbanscape extended into the depths below her. She realized she had never put a boot to solid ground on Coruscant. Not really. Instead, she, like so many, simply trod the network of walkways and Duracrete streets on the surface level, unaware of most that went on in the lower levels. She had lived on the planet for decades, but did not know it well. The sun pulled itself into the sky, slowly, as if it did not want to reveal the ruin. Her eye fell on a distant, isolated skyrise that leaned precipitously to one side, the attack having damaged its foundation. It, like all of Coruscant, like the entirety of the Republic, had been knocked off kilter. In the distance, the black dots of a few air cars and speeders populated the morning sky. Sirens blared from somewhere, rescue teams still searching the wreckage, pulling the living and dead from the ruins. Coruscant was coming to life for another day, the day after everything had changed. As they traveled, they encountered piles of rubble, streets flooded by broken water lines, shattered valves spitting gas or fuel. It was like seeing bloody viscera, the innards of the planet. A few faces regarded them from behind windows or from balconies high above. The uncertainty and fear in their eyes, the expected after effect of unexpected war, but they saw far fewer people than Aaron might have imagined. She wondered if many had fled to the lower levels. Perhaps the damage was less severe there. If so, the underlevels must have been thronged. As the morning stretched, an increasing number of vehicles filled the sky. Medical and rescue ships screamed past. Swoops and speeders bearing one or two riders to who knew where streaked over them. Due to her empathic sense, Aaron felt the dead in the air as a tangible thing. The dread in the air as a tangible thing. A pall that overhung the entire planet. It wore on her, weighed her down. The towers of Duracrete and Transparisteel seemed ready to fall in on her. She felt hunched, tensed in anticipation of a blow. The dread was omnipresent, an entire planet of billions of people projecting raw emotion into the air. She could not wall them up. Wall them out. Ugh. She could not wall them out. She did not want to wall them out. The Jedi had failed them. She deserved to feel what they felt. Aaron, did you hear me? Aaron. She came back to herself to see Zirid standing beside an open-topped Armin speeder. It was just sitting there in the middle of the street. His face twisted with concern when he saw her expression. His straggly beard and wide eyes made him look like a religious fanatic. "Are you all right?" he asked. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm fine. It's just fear is everywhere. The air is full of it." Zirid nodded, his lips pressed together and forming a soft line of sympathy. "I'm sorry you have to feel it, Aaron. Everyone on Coruscant knows that the Empire has done what the Empire has done to some conquered worlds. But if they were going to do it here, I think they'd have done it already." "It's only been a day," Aaron said, but still she hoped he was right. A squad of Imperial fighters flew high overhead, the unmistakable hum of their engines cutting through the morning silence. Zirid climbed into the speeder, stripped its storage compartment of 4 protein bars, a pair of macro binoculars, and 2 bottles of water. He tossed a bar and a bottle to Aaron. "Eat, drink," he said, and ducked under the control panel. "What are you doing?" Aaron asked him. She guzzled the water to get the grit out of her throat, then peeled the wrapper on the bar and ate. The speeder's engine hummed to life, and Zirid popped back up from under the instrumentation. "I'm taking this speeder. We can't walk all the way to the Jedi Temple. Get in." He must have read the look on her face. "It isn't stealing, Aaron. It's abandoned. Come on." She climbed in and strapped herself into the seat. Zirid launched the Armin into the sky. They made rapid progress. There was little traffic. Zirid flew at an altitude of about half a kilo. I don't like it when they abbreviate kilometer as kilo, but whatever. For a time, Aaron looked out and down on Coruscant, but the rubbled buildings, smoldering fires, and black holes in the urbanscape wore her down until it all began to look the same. When she realized she had become inured to the sight of the destruction, she sat back in her seat and stared out the windshield at the smoke-filled sky. "The temple is ahead," Zirid said, coming around. "There." When she saw it, her heart sank. A hole opened in her stomach, and she felt as if she were falling. She extended a hand to the safety bar and held it tight to keep from falling. "I'm so sorry, Aaron," Zirid said. Aaron had no words. The temple, the Jedi sanctuary that had stood for millennia, had been reduced to a mountain of smoking stone and steel. The destruction wrought by the Sith on Coruscant generally had left her pained. The destruction of the temple left her gutted. She had to remember to breathe. She could not take her eyes from it. Zirid reached across the speeder and took her hand in his. She closed her fingers around his and held on as if she were sinking and he was a life ring. "I don't think we should set down, Aaron. No data cards survived that." "Fly closer, Zirid." "You sure?" She nodded, and he took the speeder in for a better look. Smoke leaked from between the blackened stones. The remains of the towers lay in chunks across the ruins of the main temple as if they had folded over on it. Broken columns jutted up from the ruins like broken bones. Aaron braced herself for bodies, but thankfully saw none. Instead, she saw broken pieces of statuary here and there, the jagged remains of the stone corpses of ancient Jedi masters. Thousands of years of honorable history reduced in a day to dust and ash and ruins. by Imperial bombs. The fires would smolder for days, deep in the pile. Loss suffused her, but she was too dried out for tears. How wonderful and terrible, she thought, was the capacity of the mind to absorb pain. Zirid had not released her hand, Zirid had not released her hand, nor she his. If your master was here when the bombs hit, then he died in the blast, and it was just some anonymous Imperial pilot. Aaron, there's no one for you to find, no one for you to hunt down. She was shaking her head before he'd finished speaking. He did not die in a blast. Aaron, she jerked her hand from him, and some of the grief and anger she felt sharpened her tone. I felt it, Zirid. I felt him die, and it was no bomb blast. It was a lightsaber. Right here. She touched her abdomen, and the memory of the pain she'd felt when Master Zalo had died made her wince. Zirid's arm and hand still stretched across the seat toward Aaron, but he did not touch her. I believe you. I do. He circled the ruins in silence. So what now? I need to go down. That is not a good idea, Aaron. He was probably right, but she wanted to touch it, to stand amid the rubble. She fought down the impulse and tried to quell her emotions with thought, reason. No, don't go down. There is another way in. There's nothing standing. The temple extends underground. One of the rooms where backup surveillance is stored is fairly deep. It may have survived the blast. Zirid looked as if he wanted to protest, but did not. Aaron was grateful to him for it. Where's the other way in? Through the works, Aaron answered. Malgus's private shuttle bore him toward Coruscant's surface. Alina and her team had left Valor in a convoy of 3 shuttles an hour earlier. They would already be well into their mission. He sat alone, the steady rasp of his respirator the only sound in the compartment. Staring at his reflection in the transparent steel window of the shuttle, he tried to sort his thoughts. Wild ideas bounced around his brain, thoughts that he dared not latch onto for fear of where they would carry him. He knew only one thing with certainty. Angral was wrong. The Dark Council was wrong. Perhaps even the Emperor was wrong. Peace was a mistake. Peace would cause the Empire to drift into decadence, as had the Republic. Peace would cause the Sith to become weak in their understanding of the Force, as had the Jedi. The sacking of Coruscant was evidence of that decadence, that weakness. No, peace was atrophy. No, peace was atrophy. Only through conflict could potential be realized. Malgus understood that the role of the Republic and the Jedi was merely to serve as the whetstone against which the Empire and the Sith would sharpen themselves, make themselves more deadly. Peace, were it to come, would dull them. But, while Malgus knew that the Empire needed war, he had yet to determine how to bring it about. "Entering the atmosphere, my lord," said the pilot. He watched the fire of atmospheric entry sheathe the ship and pondered something he recalled from his time at the Sith Academy on Droman Kaas. It was said the ancient Sith of Korriban purged their bodies with fire, learned strength through pain, encouraged growth through destruction. There was wisdom in that, Malgus thought. Sometimes the thing could not be fixed. Instead, it had to be destroyed and remade. "Remade," he said, his voice harsh through that respirator. "Destroyed and remade." "Darth Malgus," said the pilot over the comm, "where shall I fly you? I do not have a flight plan." The fire of re-entry had faded. The smolder in Malgus was growing into flames. Aaron Lanier's unexpected presence had started him down a path he should have trod long ago. He was grateful to her for that. Below, the cityscape of Coruscant, pockmarked and smoking here and there from Imperial bombs, came into view. The Jedi Temple, he said. Circle at 100 meters. If nothing else, he would soon have his own personal war. Aaron Lanier had come to Coruscant looking for him, and he had returned looking for her. They would meet on the rubbled grave of the Jedi Order. Aaron pointed over the windscreen at an enormous building of duracrete and steel that could have held 10 athletic stadiums. The peak of the dome stood several hundred meters high, and the innumerable venting towers and smokestacks that stuck from its surface looked like a thicket of spears. Not a single window marred the metal and duracrete facade. The works, Aaron said, or at least one of the hubs. Sit down here. As Zirid piloted the speeder down, Aaron looked back over the urban scape, orienting herself to the relative position of the Jedi Temple. She could not see the actual ruins from their location. The intervening terrain blocked it, but she could see the smoke plumes. The image of the ruined temple still haunted her memory. Zirid put the speeder down atop a nearby parking structure. Few other vehicles shared the structure. A single speeder and 2 swoops, both tipped onto their sides, were all that Aaron saw. "Where is everyone?" Zirid asked. "Hiding in the lower tunnels, maybe. Staying home." Though it seemed a lifetime ago, the attack had happened only a day before. The populace was still in shock, hiding perhaps, picking up what pieces they could. They took a lift and auto walk to the works hub. A large gate and security station provided ingress through the 10-meter duracrete walls. While the gate remained closed, the security station stood empty. Ordinarily, it would have been well guarded. Aaron and Zirid climbed over and through unchallenged. The mammoth structure of the hub, larger even than a Republic cruiser, loomed before them. Zirid drew a blaster from his hip holster, then pulled another from a hidden holster in the small of his back and offered it to Aaron. She declined. "Thought I'd ask," Zirid said. "That lightsaber doesn't do you much good at 20 meters. "You'd be surprised," she said. The arched double doors that offered entry looked like something from an ancient Alderaanian castle built for Titans. They were enormous. Aaron's Raven starfighter could have flown through them. "Power's still on and controls are still alive," Zirid said, examining the console on the doors. Aaron tapped a code she'd learned years before into the console. Somewhere, invisible gears turned, the groans of giants, and the doors began to rise. The doors opened and they entered, walking empty corridors that smelled of grease and faintly of burning. The metal floor vibrated under their feet, the snores of some enormous, unseen mechanical beast. The shaking increased as they moved deeper into the complex. Somewhere, metal ground against metal. They cut away from the wide main corridor through which they had entered and moved through a network of halls and offices sized not for vehicles, but for sentience. "I've never seen the inside of a hub," Zirid said. "Not much to look at. Where are all the mechanisms?" Aaron led him through a series of deserted security checkpoints until they reached a set of soundproof doors that opened onto the central chamber under the dome. "Earwear and helmets required beyond this point for all non-droids," read a sign on the door. She pulled open the doors and sound poured out in a rush. The rhythmic clang of metal scraping metal, the hiss of vented air and gas, the discordant hum of hundreds of enormous engines and pumps, the beeps and whistles of maintenance droids. Zirid's arms fell slack at his side. His mouth hung open. Excuse me. The works was difficult to comprehend all at once. The central chamber itself was several kilometers in diameter and hundreds of meters tall. Tiered flooring and a network of stairs and cage lifts made the whole of it look like a mad industrial artist's take on an insect hive. Aaron always felt miniaturized when she saw it. It seemed made for an alien race 10 times the size of humans. gears as large as starfighters, pipes wide enough to fly a speeder into, individual mechanisms that reached floor to ceiling, chains and belts hundreds of meters long. Hundreds of droids scurried, rolled, and walked among the workings, checking gauges, readouts, maintaining equipment, greasing mechanisms. The sound was overwhelming, a deafening industrial cacophony. Compared with the advanced technology apparent elsewhere on Coruscant, with its sleek lines, compact designs, and sheer elegance, the works looked primitive, garish in its enormity, like a throwback to ancient times when steam and combustion powered industry, but Aaron knew it was an illusion. The works stretched under Coruscant's crust from pole to pole, generally accessible only through the hubs. Its pipes, lines, hoses, and conduits formed the circulatory system of the planet, through which water, heat, electricity, and any number of other necessities flowed. It represented the peak of Republic technology. "Follow me," she shouted over the noise, and Zirid nodded. Following signs and calling upon her memory, Aaron led Zirid through the maze of raised flooring, lifts, and auto stairs. Droids moved past them, oblivious, and it occurred to Aaron that the droids in the works would probably have kept doing their work even if everyone on Coruscant was dead. The thought struck her as grotesque. Zirid turned circles as they walked, trying to take it all in. Wow, okay. "This is unbelievable," he said to her. "I wish I had a holorecorder." She nodded and hurried along. They soon left behind the mechanical tumult of the hub proper. As the sound faded behind them, the corridors narrowed and darkened, and the wall-mounted lights became less frequent. Pipes and conduits snaked on and through the ceiling, the floor, the entrails of planet-wide convenience. Zirid pulled a chem light from one of the pockets of his flight pants, snapped it in half, and held it aloft as they advanced. Both of them were sweating in the still air of the tunnels. "There are security droids in these tunnels," she said. "We don't have a proper pass. They will try to stop us." "Great," Zirid said. Then, "You sure you know where you're going?" She nodded, though she was beginning to feel lost. From ahead she heard the whir of servos, the rattle of metal. A droid. She pulled Zirid to a stop and activated her lightsaber, fearing a security droid. Dust danced in the green light of its glow. Zirid pulled his blaster, held the chem light up higher. "What is it?" he whispered. A form moved in the shadows, small, cylindrical, a droid. Not a security droid, but an astromech. It emerged from the light, into the light, and she saw the flat, circular head and dun coloration of a T-7. Scratches marred the droid's surface, and loose wires dangled from one of its shoulder joints. But she knew its color and felt as if she were seeing a ghost, a specter from her past, haunting the dark tunnels of the works. Deactivating her blade, she said, "T7?" Her voice cracked on the words. When he beeped a greeting in droid speak, she knew it was him. His mechanical voice, redolent somehow of very human joys, triumphs, and pain. The soundtrack of her time in the temple of her life with Master Zalo. Tears pooled in her eyes as T7 wheeled toward them. "You know this astromech?" Zirid asked. "It was Master Zalo's droid," she said. She knelt before T7, daubing at the dirt on his head as she might a small child. He whistled with pleasure. "How did you get here?" she asked. "How did you survive the attack?" She struggled to follow his droid speak, so rapidly did he spit out his beeps, whistles, and chirps. In the end, she determined that a Sith force had attacked the temple that Master Zalo that Master Zalo had sent T7 away during the fight, and that T7 had sneaked back to the battlefield after all had gone quiet. Later, the Sith had returned, presumably to lay explosives, and T7 had fled to the lower levels. I know about Master Zalo, T7, she said. He moaned a low whistle of despair. Did you see him when it happened? The droid whistled a negative. Why did you go back after the battle? Zirad asked the droid. A long whistle, then a compartment in T7's body slid open, and T7 extended a thin metal arm from within. The arm held Master Zalo's lightsaber. Aaron recoiled, stared at it for a long moment, memories crowding around her, falling like rain. You went back to get this? Just to get this? Another negative whistle. Another long, hard-to-follow monologue in droid speak. T7 had gone back to see if anyone had survived, but had found only the lightsaber. Once more, Aaron stared determinism in the face. The Force had brought her to Zirad at the exact moment when Zirad was making a run to Coruscant, and now the Force had caused T7 to find Master Zalo's lightsaber so that the droid could give it to her. Aaron decided that it could not be coincidence. It was the Force showing her that the course she pursued was the right one, at least for her. She took the cool metal of the saber's hilt in her hand, tested its weight. The hilt was larger than hers, slightly heavier, yet it felt familiar in her hand. She remembered the many times she'd seen it in Master Zalo's hands as he had trained her in lightsaber combat. She activated it, and the green blade sprang to life. She stared at it, thinking of her master, then turned it off. She clipped it to her belt beside her own and patted T7 on the head. Thank you, T7. This means more to me than you know. You were very brave to return there. The droid beeped with pleasure and sympathy. Have you seen any other survivors? Zirad asked, and Aaron felt ashamed for not asking the question herself. T7 whistled a somber negative. Zirad holstered his blaster. What about security droids? Another negative. I need to get to the backup surveillance station, Aaron said. Is it still standing? Can you lead the way? T7 chirped with enthusiasm, spun his head around, and headed off down the corridor, wires still dangling from his shoulder joint. Aaron and Zirad fell in behind him. Aaron felt the weight of the extra lightsaber on her belt, heavy with the memories it bore. T7 led them on through the labyrinthine passageways of the works, avoiding collapsed or blocked corridors, doubling back when necessary, descending even deeper into the hive of pipes, gears, and machinery. Aaron was soon lost. Had they not encountered T7, they could have wandered for days before finding their way. In time, they reached an area familiar to Aaron. We're near now, she said to Zirad. Ahead, she saw the turbo lift that would take them up into the lower levels of the temple. T7 plugged into the control panel, and the lift's mechanisms began to hum. As the doors slid open, Aaron braced herself to see something horrible, but there was nothing behind them save the empty box of the passenger compartment. The three of them entered, the doors closed, and the lift began to rise. Aaron could feel Zirad's concern for her. He watched her sidelong, thinking she did not notice, but she did, and his concern touched her. I am glad that you're with me, she said to him. He colored with embarrassment. Yes, well, me too. The doors opened to reveal a long corridor. The emergency lights overhead flickered and buzzed. T7 started ahead, and Aaron and Zirad followed. Aaron had walked the corridor before long ago, yet to her everything felt different. It no longer felt like the Jedi Temple. Instead, it felt like a tomb. The Sith attack had destroyed more than merely the temple's structure. Something else had died when the structure fell. It had been a symbol of justice for thousands of years, and now it was gone. There was symbolism in that, Aaron supposed. Wow. Okay. Um, okay. Sorry. I was just looking ahead to see how much there was in this chapter. It's a fairly long chapter. She wanted out as soon as possible, but first she had to see if there was any record of the attack. T7's servos and Aaron's and Zirad's footsteps sounded loud in the silence. Rooms off the main corridor looked entirely ordinary. Chairs, desks, comps, everything in order. The attack had destroyed the surface structure but left the core intact. Maybe there was symbolism in that too, Aaron thought, and she let herself hope. When they reached the secondary surveillance room, they found it too entirely intact. The 5 monitoring stations each featured a chair, desk, and a computer with a large vid screen suspended from the wall above it. All of the screens were dark. "Can you get some power in here, T7?" asked Aaron. The droid beeped an affirmative, rolled over to a wall jack, and plugged in. In moments, the room came to life. The overhead lights brightened. Computers and the monitors hummed awake. "I want to see whatever we've got of the attack. Can you find that?" Again, the droid beeped an affirmative. Zirad wheeled a chair over to Aaron. She sat, her heart racing, her breath coming fast. Zirad put a hand on her shoulder, just for a moment, then pulled up another chair and sat beside her. They stared at the dark security monitor, waiting for T7 to show them horror. Okay, sorry. Kind of lost track of where I was for a second there. Wow, I just totally lost focus. I apologize. All is dark, droid affirmative, wall jack, beeped affirmative. Okay, there we are. Yeah, I just completely, my eyes went, and I lost where I was completely. Okay, the droid let out an excited series of whistles. He had located the footage. Aaron gripped the arms of the chair. "Play it," she said. A single glowing line formed on the monitor and expanded up and down until it filled the screen. Images formed on it. The main security cam had a view opposite the main doors of the temple, so it could record those coming in or leaving. Aaron's mouth was dry. She was afraid to blink for fear of missing something, though that was ridiculous since T7 could freeze, replay, and even magnify any image on the screen. They watched as a cloaked figure and a Twi'lek woman, armed with blasters, walked through the temple's enormous doors. "Does the temple post guards?" Zirad asked. Aaron nodded. Neither of them needed to say what must have happened to the guards. As the pair walked brazenly down the entry hallway, the cam showed people gathering on the balconies above, looking down. "They didn't know what to make of him," Zirad said. Aaron nodded. "He is big," Zirad said. "Freeze on his face and magnify," Aaron said to T7. The image froze, centered on the man's hooded face, and magnified. She could make out nothing in the shadowed depths of his cowl except what looked to be the bottom of a mask of some kind. "Is that a mask?" Zirad asked. "I don't know. The Twi'lek, T7," she said, and T7 pulled the image back, recentered on the Twi'lek, and did the same. The Twi'lek's face filled the screen. "Skin color is unusual," Zirad said. He leaned forward in his chair, peering intently. "She was beautiful," Aaron allowed. "She was a murderer, or at least associated with one. And she was a murderer." "See the scars?" Zirad said. He stood and pointed a finger at the screen, at the Twi'lek's throat. There, a jagged scar cut an irregular path across her neck. Between that and her skin, maybe we can identify her. Maybe, Aaron said, and tried to swallow. She was less interested in the Twi'lek than she was in the hooded figure. Continue, T7. They watched as the two strode halfway down the hall. Aaron's breath caught when she watched Master Zalo emerge from off-cam to confront the Sith and the Twi'lek. 6 other Jedi Knights accompanied him. Freeze, T7. The frame stopped and Aaron studied Master Zalo's face. He looked as he always had, stern, focused. Seeing him somehow freed her to grieve with something other than tears. She recalled some of their training sessions, how he had at first insisted that she fight with his style, but had later relented and allowed her to find her own path. The memory made her smile and cry. "Are you all right?" Zirad asked. She nodded, wiped away the tears with the sleeve of her robe. T7, let me see. I thought she wasn't wearing robes. She took them off. Whatever. Minor detail. T7, let me see the faces on the other Jedi. T7 flipped through a variety of footage from recorders at different angles until it finally captured the faces of the other Jedi. Aaron recognized each of them, though she did not know them well. Still, she recited their names. She figured she owed them at least that. Bainan, Saris, Okian, Draird, Kursal, Kala. Friends? Zirad asked, his voice soft. No, Aaron said, but they were Jedi. It's not possible that this Sith and Twi'lek took down those Jedi and the temple alone, Zirad said, though he sounded uncertain. Is it? Aaron did not know. Continue, T7. The footage started again. Master Zalo went face to face with the Sith. The other Jedi ignited their blades. Aaron stared at Master Zalo and the Sith warrior, seeing if they exchanged words, gestures, anything. They didn't, at least as far as she could see. Stang, Zirad breathed. What? Aaron said. Freeze it, T7. What is it? The image froze. She saw nothing unusual happening between Master Zalo and the Sith. There, Zirad said. He bounced out of his seat again and pointed at something beyond the temple's tall entrance, something in the sky. Aaron did not see it. What is it? A ship, Zirad said. Here, see it? Aaron stood and squinted at the screen. She did see it, though it was hard to distinguish against the sky through the slit of the temple's floor-to-ceiling open doors. Note the silhouette, Zirad said. That's an NR-2 gully jumper, a Republic ship, like the kind I used to fly. See it? Aaron did, but she did not understand its significance. Magnify, T7, said Zirad, and the droid complied. The ship came into clear view. No markings, Zirad said. But look at its nose, its trajectory. It's coming down, right at the temple. You sure? It doesn't look damaged, Zirad said thoughtfully. Back out to normal magnification and play it, T7. They watched in awed silence as the gully jumper crashed through the temple's entrance, tore through the hall, collapsing columns as it went, a rolling mass of metal and flame, until it stopped right behind the Sith facing Master Zalo. Neither the Sith nor Master Zalo had moved. Midsection is still intact, Zirad said. It must have been reinforced. He looked over to Aaron. There's something in it. A bomb, maybe? Not a bomb, Aaron said, beginning to understand. They watched as a large hatch on the center compartment of the NR-2 exploded outward, and dozens of Sith warriors poured out, glowing red blades in hand. Zirad sat back in his chair. Worse than a bomb. Master Zalo ignited his blade, and many more Jedi rushed in from off-cam to reinforce him. Aaron watched it all, her eyes fixed on the Sith. As the battle began, he discarded his cloak, showing his face at last. Freeze it, she said, and T7 did. Her voice was cold. Magnify his face. The image centered and grew to show the Sith, a bald head lined with blue veins, the scarred face, the intense eyes, and not a mask, but a respirator. That's the same man from the cruiser, Zirad said. Darth Malgus, Aaron said, sudden tension forming at the base of her skull. Darth Malgus led the attack. She stared into Malgus's dark eyes for a time, hardened herself for what she knew would be coming. Continue it, T7. She watched the battle unfold, trying to keep her passions in check. She imagined she could feel the emotions of the combatants pouring through the vid. Her entire body was tense, coiled as she watched. A flow of battle separated Master Malgus. The flow of battle separated Master Zalo and Malgus from the outset. Both fought their way through enemies, obviously seeking the other. That's a Mandalorian, Zirad said. Aaron nodded. A Mandalorian in full battle armor appeared amid the battle flamethrowers spitting fire. That's hotter than some war zones I've been in, Zirad said. It was. Flames burned everywhere. Piles of rubble littered the hall. Blaster fire crisscrossed the battlefield, and everywhere Jedi fought Sith. It became difficult to track any individual actions. Everything bled into the anonymous chaos of battle. She kept her eyes locked on Master Zalo as he moved toward Malgus, and as Malgus moved toward him. As they closed on each other, she saw Malgus save the Twi'lek woman from a Padawan's attack, saw him respond with even greater anger when she was hit with blaster fire. I didn't know Sith cared about anything, Zirad said. She too found Malgus's response surprising, but had little time to consider it because Malgus and Master Zalo at last met in battle. She rose from her chair as the duel began to unfold, stepping closer to the monitor. She watched them trade flurries, each test the other's skill. She watched Malgus throw his lightsaber, saw Master Zalo leap over it, saw Malgus knock him from the air in the midst of his leap, and follow up with a leaping charge that Master Zalo avoided at the last minute. Her heart was pounding. She kept hoping for something to intervene, to change the outcome she knew could not be changed. Barring that, she hoped to see a mistake from Master Zalo or some treachery by Malgus that would explain what she expected in moments, Master Zalo's fall to Malgus. They engaged on the far side of the hall, Master Zalo loosing a torrent of blows. Malgus fell back under the onslaught, but Aaron saw that he was drawing Master Zalo in, and then it happened. Master Zalo slammed the hilt of his lightsaber into the side of Malgus's face, driving him back a step. He moved to follow up, but Malgus anticipated it, spun, and drove his lightsaber through Master Zalo's abdomen. That's enough, T7. We've seen enough. That's enough, T7. Zirad said, we've seen enough. We haven't, Aaron said. Play it again, T7. The droid did. Again. Again, he says something at the end. Close up on his mouth. T7 did as she asked. Master Zalo's blow to Malgus's face had knocked his respirator aside, and Aaron could see the Sith's scarred, deformed lips. He mouthed words to Master Zalo as Master Zalo died. Aaron read his lips, whispered the words. It's all going to burn. She found that she was holding her side as she watched, as if it were she that had been impaled on a Sith blade. She relived the pain she'd felt on Alderaan when she'd felt Master Zalo die, and overlaying all of it, anger. And now she had a focus for that anger, Darth Malgus. Again, T7. Aaron, Zirad said. Again. Not again, T7. Zirad turned around so that they were facing each other. What are you doing? What more do you need to see? I'm not seeing it, I'm feeling it. Leave me alone, Zirad. He must have understood, for he released her and she turned back to the monitor. Magnify Master Zalo's face and play it again, T7. She watched his expression as he died over and over. His eyes haunted her, but she could not look away. Each time, before the light went out of them, she saw in his eyes what he was thinking the moment he died. I failed. And then Malgus's words, it's all going to burn. Whatever walls she had built around her pain collapsed as thoroughly as the temple. Her eyes welled and tears poured freely down her face. Yet still she watched. She wanted to remember her master's pain, tuck it away and hold it inside of her, a dark seed to yield dark fruit when she finally faced Malgus. Before she killed Malgus, she desperately wanted him to feel the same kind of pain Master Zalo had felt. A gentle touch on her arm, Zirid brought her around. The monitor screen was blank. How long had she been sitting there, staring at a blank screen, imagining death and revenge and pain? Time to go, Aaron, Zirid said, and helped steer her from the room. T7 whistled sympathy. Are you all right? Zirid asked. She knew how she must look. Using the sleeve of her tunic, she wiped the tears from her face. I'm all right, she said. He looked as if he wanted to embrace her, but she knew he would not take the liberty without her giving him a sign that it was all right. She gave him no such sign. She did not want relief from her grief, her pain. She simply wanted to pass it on to Malgus somehow. Jeez. Okay. We're almost through this chapter. It's a long damn chapter. Keep a copy of that footage, T7, she said. Bring it with you. The droid beeped in affirmative. They walked back through the works and to the surface in silence. By the time they returned to their speeder, Erin had rebuilt the walls around her emotions. She managed the grief, endured the pain, but put it within reach so she could call on it when she needed it. She and Zirid lifted T7 onto the droid mount at the rear of the speeder. I need to get up to that cruiser, she said. Zirid activated a magnetic clamp to hold T7 in place. You can't attack a cruiser, Aaron. I don't want to attack it. I just want to get aboard it. And face him, Darth Malgus. And face him, she offered with a nod. And how do you think that plays out if you get aboard? Are you just going to walk through all those Imperial troops? Think he'll just let you through and meet you in honorable combat? She did not like Zirid's tone. I'll bring the cruiser down with him on it. And you on it. She stuck out her chin. If that's what it takes. He slapped a hand in frustration on T7's body. The droid beeped in irritation. Aaron, you've been watching the holonet too much. It won't work like that. You'll get captured, tortured, killed. He's a Sith. They flew a ship into the temple, killed dozens of Jedi, bombed Coruscant. Come on, think. I have, and I have to do this. He must have seen the resolve in her eyes. He swallowed, looked past her as if gathering his thoughts, then back at her. You said you would help me get off planet. I know, she said. I can't follow you to the cruiser. I have a daughter, Aaron. I just want to get off the planet and get back to her before the exchange or anyone else gets to her. The heat went out of her in a rush. You've done more than enough, Zirid. I wouldn't let you come even if you volunteered. They both stared at each other for a long time, something unsaid hanging in the air between them. T7's head rotated from Zirid to Aaron and back to Zirid. You don't need to face him, he said to her. Grime from the works stained Zirid's coat and trousers. Lack of sleep had painted circles under his brown eyes. He hadn't shaved in days, and black stubble coated his cheeks. His appearance once more struck Aaron as that of a mad prophet, though it seemed she was the one acting out of madness. Yes, I do, she said. She reached out a hand and wiped away some dirt on his cheek. At first he looked startled at her touch, then looked as if he wanted to say something but did not. We go our separate ways here, Z-Man, she said. She sensed his alarm at the thought. You keep the speeder in T7. I'll figure something else out. Goodbye, Zirid. T7 uttered a doleful whistle as she walked away. Zirid's words pulled her back around, just as hers had pulled him back around earlier in the day. Let me help you, Aaron. I'm not going at that cruiser, but I can help you get aboard. How? I don't know. Maybe you stow away on an Imperial transport heading for it. He pointed at a distant black form moving across the afternoon sky. They come and go regularly and always to the same spaceport. And I know that spaceport. I've parked Fat Man there myself a few times. I'll figure out a way to get you aboard a transport while I find a ship to get me off planet. So no goodbyes yet. I still need your help and you still need mine. Good enough? Erin did not have to consider long. She could use Zirad's help, and she wanted to keep his company for as long as possible. Good enough, she said. And who knows, he said as she climbed into the speeder. Maybe you'll come to your senses in the meantime. And that is the end of that chapter. And I am going to take a quick break before I jump into the next one. I'm going to count the pages here real quick. 20 more pages to go, but I think I'm going to stick to that. I am going to go ahead and read this next one, but I'm going to take a quick break, refill my drink, and I will be right back. here we are. Back. All right. I was just looking ahead at where we're at. Once we finish this, well, at the end of the session, I'll tell you where we're headed from here. So, Chapter 11. Zira drove the Armin speeder low, hugging the urbanscape until he reached a bombed-out apartment building. There was nothing particularly notable about it. It just seemed a decent place to hole up. The facade had fallen away from the building's upper levels, exposing the interior flats and rooms. It looked as if the Empire had peeled the rind off the building to expose its guts. Zirad supposed the Empire had done just that to all of Coruscant. They had vivisected the Republic. The rubbled facade of the building lay in a heap of glass and stone at the building's base, a pile of ruin intermixed with furniture, shattered vid screens, and other indicia of habitation. The interior remained largely intact, though the dust of pulverized stone coated everything. Shards of shattered glass like fangs hung from windows. A few live wires spat sparks. Water leaked from somewhere, formed a minor cascade pouring down from one of the upper floors. Not a single light glowed in the entire building. It appeared abandoned. This should serve, he said to Aaron and T7. He piloted the speeder around and through the rubble until he had it near one of the exposed lower apartments. Serve for what? Aaron asked, and T7 echoed her question with a beep. I'm going to scout the spaceport. You both are going to stay here. Aaron shook her head. No, I should come. I work better alone, Aaron, at least when it comes to surveillance. Take some time. I don't need time. I need to get to that cruiser. And this is the best way to do it. So take some time to eat and pull yourself together. He winced as he said this last, thinking she'd take offense, but it appeared barely to register. I'll be back as soon as I can. He tossed her another of the protein bars he'd taken from the speeder's console compartment. Zirad, she said. Please, Aaron, I'm just eyeballing it. I won't do anything without you. She relented with a sigh and climbed out of the speeder. She unclamped T7 and lowered him to the ground. I'll return as soon as I can, Zirad said. Keep an eye on her, T7. The droid whooped agreement, and Zirad sped off. I guess we just went into another ad. So, since somebody might not be able to see me right now, I'll just ramble on about nothing until the ad is over. So, it's still got 40 seconds to go. So, I don't know. I'm liking this book, but not as nearly as much as some of the other stuff we've read. But it is still Star Wars, so I like it. I don't dislike it. I think the author gets a bit too much into the emotional stuff for me. It makes me suspect this person is fairly young. But anyway, here we go. The audience should be back. Your community is back. Okay. Avoiding the search and rescue teams working in the still smoldering ruins, Zirad made his way toward the Quadrant's port, the Liston spaceport. He could see it in the distance, framed against the night sky, the curved appendages of its large craft landing pads raised skyward like the hopeful arms of a penitent. It appeared undamaged by the attack, at least from a distance. As he watched, the roof doors to one of the many small craft landing bays opened in the main body of the port, a mouth spitting light into the dark air. He killed the speeder's thrusters and pulled to the side. In the sky above the port, the running lights of 3 Imperial shuttles came into view as they descended into the port. The mouth of the doors swallowed them, closed, and killed the light once more. At least he knew there were ships there. Zirad stayed where he was and for a time watched to see if there was more traffic. He saw none. In normal times, even a small spaceport like the Liston would have been buzzing with activity. He fired the speeder back up and drove on, wanting to get a closer look. The area around the port to a distance of several kilometers had been hit hard by Imperial bombs. Burned-out buildings tilted like drunks on their foundations. Jagged, charred holes pockmarked the ground. Auto walks hung askew, forming a mad web of walking paths that led nowhere. Live wires spat angry sparks. Chunks of duracrete lay here and there haphazardly, strewn about by the force of the bombs. He drove slowly, without lights, avoiding the hazards. He saw no one in the area, no movement at all. It felt like a ghost town. The stink of char hung in the air. So too the faint, sickly sweet stink of organic decay. The ruins were the tombs of thousands. He tried to put it out of his mind, hoping that many had been able to flee into the lower levels before the bombing began in earnest. He saw an unattended multi-story parking structure. Half of it lay in ruins. The other half looked stable enough, and it was only a few blocks from the port. He drove the speeder into the lower level and parked it there. He'd cover the rest of the way on foot. He wanted to eyeball the port unseen and could do that best without a vehicle. Republic Flight School had taught him ground evasion to prepare him should his ship ever go down in enemy-held territory, and he put his skills to use. As unobtrusively as a shadow, he moved among the stone, rubble, and steel beams and abandoned vehicles, keeping under cover as much as possible to avoid being seen from the air. He knew the Empire sometimes used airborne surveillance droids. Ahead, a 10-story hotel, the Nebula, stuck out of the smoking, rubbled urbanscape. Unlike almost everything else around it, it looked mostly intact except for a few shattered windows on the lower floors. Zirad saw no lights in any of the rooms, so he assumed it had no power and was unoccupied. He dashed across the street to the hotel, pried open the doors, and entered the lobby. No welcoming droids, no one at the concierge desk. Deep darkness. "Hello?" he shouted. "Anyone here?" No response. With the power out, he ignored the lifts and headed for the stairs. He was mildly winded by the time he reached the roof access door. He kicked it open, blaster in hand. Nothing. He ducked low and headed for the edge of the roof. From there he had a good view of the spaceport. He pulled out the macro binoculars he'd taken from the Armin speeder and glassed the port. The control spire was a dark spike of transparent steel, obviously unoccupied. All the entrances appeared locked down except one, and a dozen Imperial soldiers in full gray battle armor guarded it. Zirad imagined there were more Imperial troops within the complex itself. It seemed the Empire had shut down all of the port save for a few of the small craft landing pads, probably to give the already stretched troops less ground to secure. Large transparent steel windows in the wall opened up on the near paths. Through them he saw the 3 Imperial shuttles that had just landed. All of them had a numerical designation written above the word Valor, the name of Darth Malgus's cruiser. "Looks like you'll get your wish, Aaron," he muttered. He saw another ship there too, a modified Imperial dropship, Dragonfly class. He rolled a dial on the macrobinoculars to magnify the image. No Imperial markings, and the landing ramp was up as if it were ready to launch. A couple of dozen workers in dungarees went about the business of operating the port, as did half a dozen or so droids, wheeling among the ships, fuel lines, loading cranes, and comp terminals. A flash of lavender filled the binoculars' field of vision, and he backed out of the high magnification. It says modification, but I think it's supposed to be magnification. A Twi'lek female had walked in front of the window and temporarily filled the lenses with her lavender skin. Lavender skin. He watched as a Twi'lek and a squad of uniformed Imperial soldiers in half armor put 6 hooded and manacled sentients into one of the shuttles. Zirid tried to keep the binoculars on the Twi'lek, who appeared to be giving orders to the troops, but it necessitated hopping the binoculars from window to window as she moved, and he sometimes lost her. Like the Twi'lek in the vid at the Jedi Temple, she wore twin blasters on her hips. She also wore the tight-fitting trousers and high boots. Has to be her, he said. But he wanted to confirm, so he waited and watched. And at last she turned her face to the window, and he saw it, a jagged scar on her throat. Gotcha, he said. The Twi'lek spoke into her comlink, and the shuttle with the civvies started to wind up. As it rose on its thrusters, the roof doors of the pad slid open, once more spilling light into the night sky. When the shuttle broke the roof line, it engaged its engines and took off, presumably heading back to Valor. The doors closed behind it. The Twi'lek and about a dozen troops remained on the pad. Workers, too, and droids. Zirid watched a team of workers and the treaded box of a maintenance droid start refueling one of the shuttles with a thick hose connected to an underground tank. Seeing that, Zirid struck up on a plan. He pocketed the binoculars and hurried back out of the hotel to the speeder and back to Aaron. The shuttle flew a silent vigil over the... Excuse me. That hit quick. The shuttle flew a silent vigil over the ruins of the Jedi Temple. Malgus's pilot's voice carried over the intership comm. Boredom tinged his tone. "Shall I remain here, my lord?" "You will remain until I say otherwise," Malgus answered. "Internal and external lights are to remain off." "As you wish, my lord." Malgus's shuttle hovered over the ruins of the Jedi Temple at about 300 meters. From that height, the temple was little more than a tumble of stones in the starlight. He had lingered over the ruins for hours, as day had faded to night, and still Aaron Lanier had not shown. But she would come. He knew she would. Aaron unwrapped and ate the protein bar Zirid had given her. She and T7 had sheltered in one of the apartments. She sat on a dusty couch, the stink of a burning planet in her nostrils. She replayed in her mind Master Zalo's death, the look on his face. She saw once more the ruins of the temple, and knew that his body lay beneath the mountain of rubble. Fighting the rising tide of grief, she adopted a meditative posture, closed her eyes, and tried to drift into the Force. "Still heart, still mind," she intoned, but both proved impossible. Eventually, she sat back on the couch and stared up at the sky. The omnipresent smoke looked like black clouds against the stars. Now and again she saw a ship's lights in the distance and presumed them to belong to an Imperial patrol craft. In time, her emotional and physical exhaustion chased her down, and she drifted off to sleep. She dreamed of Master Zalo. He stood before her on the ruins of the Jedi Temple, his robes billowing in the breeze. The cracked stone face of Odin watched him. Master Zalo's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. He seemed to be trying to tell her something. "I cannot hear you, Master," she said. "What are you saying?" She tried to get closer to him, picking her way through the debris, but the closer she tried to get, the farther he moved away. Finally, her frustration got the better of her, and she screamed, "I don't know what you want me to do." She woke, heart pounding, and found T7 standing before her. He whistled a question. "No, I'm fine," she said, but she wasn't. She stood and pulled her cloak tight about her. She checked her chrono. Zirid had been gone for over an hour. He would probably be gone another hour at least. Her dream had left her shaken. She took the hilt of Master Zalo's lightsaber in her hands, turned it over, studied its craftsmanship. Its design mirrored his personality, solid, without flourish, but wonderful in its plainness. She wanted to return to the temple, to the scene where murder had occurred. She should have made Zirid set down the speeder when they'd been over it earlier. She wanted to walk among the ruins and commune with the dead. She hooked Master Zalo's weapon to her belt. I have to go somewhere, T7. I'll be back soon. He whistled another question, alarm in the beeps. Tell him I'll be back. There's nothing to worry about. She left the ruined apartment building and headed back toward the Jedi Temple. There was something there for her. There had to be. When Zirid returned to their safe house in the ruined apartment building, he found Erin gone. Her absence put a lump in his throat. T7 whistled to him from one of the apartments. Where is she, T7? He asked. The small droid chattered, whistled, and beeped so fast that Zirid could scarcely follow. In the end, he gathered that Erin had left the apartment after a short rest, and that she did not tell T7 where she was going. But Zirid knew where she would go. She'd go to where Master Zalo died. Let's go, T7, he said, and loaded the droid up onto the speeder. Erin's emotions roiled, her mood as dark as the night. Ordinarily, the artificial lights of hundreds of thousands of businesses and advertisements lit Coruscant's night sky, but the attack had knocked the power out over huge swaths of the planet, and the dark silence made the city feel like a mausoleum. Erin picked her way through the black darkness and approached the temple along the wide, stone-paved processional that once had led to the temple's grand main entrance. Malgus must have used the same approach, she realized, and it appalled her that the last person to walk the processional before the temple's fall had been a Sith. She found it obscene. She fancied she was retracing his footsteps, her boots effacing the wrongness of his passage. She slowed, steeling herself, as the rubbled structure materialized out of the darkness before her. The attack had turned the temple's once curved lines and elegant spires into a shapeless mound of ruin, a burial cairn for the Jedi Order. The sight of it scratched the scab from the wound of her grief. As she approached, the ghosts of her past rose out of the ruin. Her time in the temple as a youngling, as a Padawan, the ceremony when she'd been promoted to Jedi Knight. The temple had been her home for decades, and her father had been murdered in it. In her mind's eye, she saw the final blow that had slain her master, as clear as if she were once more watching the vid in the temple's surveillance room. She saw Malgus reverse his grip, and drive his lightsaber through Master Zalo. And once more she saw the look in Master Zalo's face as the light went out of his eyes. The despair there. He had failed, and he had known it. Maybe he had also known, as Erin now did, that the Jedi Order had failed too. The thought of her master dying with despair in his heart drove a hot spike of rage through the sore of her loss. And yet she could not shake the look she had seen in his eyes in her dream. It had looked like concern, a warning maybe. He had wanted to tell her something. Probably don't go to the dark side. That'd be my guess. She shook her head. It had been but a dream, not a vision, just a projection of her own subconscious. She dismissed it. She would find Malgus and she would kill him. She reached the edge of the ruins, climbed the jagged chunks of stone. They still felt warm, still radiated the heat of their own destruction. She walked among them, the graves of dozens of Jedi, and wept with her through her anger. A feeling seized her as the strings of her force sensitivity vibrated with a discordant note. The feeling took her by the shoulders, shook her, and emptied her of grief, leaving only anger. She knew the feeling's origin. She activated her lightsaber and tried to pinpoint Malgus's location. Malgus felt the signature of another Force user, the uncomfortable pressure of the light side, and it pulled him to his feet. The pressure reminded him of how he'd felt in the presence of Master Zalo, and he knew that Aaron Lanier had come at last. "Take the shuttle down to 50 meters," he said, adrenaline already coursing through his body, "and when I exit, you may leave." "When you exit, my lord?" Malgus did not respond. Instead, he overrode the in-flight safeties and pushed the button to open the side hatch. As the door slid open, as the night air poured in, redolent with the stink of a ruined temple and a burned planet, he let anger fill him. The ship descended to 50 meters. Below, the ruined temple was dark, covered in the velvet of night, but he perceived the presence of Aaron Lanier as clearly as he would have under a noon sun. He stepped to the doorway, drew on the Force, activated his lightsaber, and leapt out into the dark. A roar, heavy with hate and rage, pulled Aaron's eyes skyward. Malgus descended like a meteor. His cape flew out behind him and over him, a comma of darkness, and he held his lightsaber in a two-handed grip. Power went before him in a wave of visible distortion. The shuttle out of which he had leapt flew off into the night sky. Aaron fell fully into the Force, raised her defenses, took a fighting stance, and parried Malgus's two-handed overhand slash. Still, he landed in a cocoon of power, hitting the ground in an explosion of might that shattered the stones around them and turned them into a hail of shrapnel. Unflinching, Aaron deflected them with the Force as she parried another slash from Malgus. The force of the Sith's blow made her arms quiver, but she gave no ground. Blades locked, sparking, their eyes met. Malgus's dark eyes burned with a rage that knifed through her. The anger he radiated was tangible to Aaron, made the air feel greasy, polluted, but she felt something else in it, something unexpected. An odd ambivalence. "I know why you've come," he said, his voice a hiss from behind the respirator. She forced words through gritted teeth. "You killed Master Zalo." "And now I will kill you too," he said, "in the same place I killed him." He leaned into his blade, pushed her back a step, and unleashed a force-augmented kick at her ribs. But she was the quicker, and a flip sent her over his head and 50 meters away. Deeper into the mountains of ruins where her master had died. She landed in a crouch atop one of the broken columns sticking out of the rubble. "You will find that difficult," she called, and answered his anger with a wave of her own. "I assure you of that." Malgus gestured with his left hand, and the column she stood on began to shake. She leapt off it to another nearby, then another, leapfrogging her way across the ruins back toward Malgus. When she landed atop a large chunk of stone 10 meters from the Sith, he made a cutting gesture with his free hand, and 2 pieces of statuary rose from the rubble and rushed toward her from either side. She leapt into the air, and they smashed into each other beneath her, spraying shards of rock. She landed atop the remains, lightsaber ready. Malgus growled, leapt through the air from his perch toward hers. She slid to the side of his downward slash, and his blades split the stone at their feet. She unleashed a crosscut that would have decapitated him had he not ducked under it. She flipped up and over him onto another piece of rubble 15 meters away. Taking telekinetic hold of a large stone near Malgus, she flung it at him. He never moved, simply held his ground and split the incoming rock in 2 with his lightsaber. Red sparks and bits of stone rained down. Aaron could not find her calm. She was fighting angry, but did not care. Snarling, thinking of her master, she bounded across the hill of rubble, leaping from one chunk of rock to another, closing the distance with Malgus. He answered her charge with one of his own, the 2 of them jumping across the gravestones of the Jedi Order until they closed to within striking distance. Aaron stabbed low, and Malgus slapped her blade out wide, reversed his motion, and unleashed a backhand swing at her abdomen. She leapt over it, pulling her legs in tight, and loosed a two-handed overhead strike as she came back down. Malgus parried crosswise with his blade and stepped into a force-augmented side kick aimed at her ribs. She caught the kick with her free hand, closed her arm over his leg, spun, and flung Malgus 20 meters from her. He flipped in midair and landed atop the cracked face of the Odin statue that had once lined the processional approach into the temple. She took the hilt of Master Zalo's lightsaber in her offhand, crouched, and bounded into a leap toward him. He watched her come, and at the apex of the leap's arc, he thrust his left hand at her, roaring, and veins of force lightning squirmed toward her. Ready for it, she activated Master Zalo's lightsaber, used it to form an X with her own, and intercepted the lightning on the two blades. His power met her will. The lightning twisted around the glowing blades. The force of it stopped her downward descent and held her aloft in the air for a moment, suspended on a column built of the dark side. And then she overcame it. The lightning dissipated to nothingness, and she, unharmed by it, fell straight down, landing on her feet atop a shifting pile of rubble and deactivating Master Zalo's blade. The moment she landed, Malgus was upon her, his blade slashing, stabbing, spinning. He tried to use his superior strength to force her off the stone, off balance, but she answered his strength with speed, sidestepping his blows, leaping over them, parrying, unleashing her own flurries. The hum of their weapons through the air, the sizzle of crossed blades, merged into a single song of speed and power. Zirid flew the speeder full throttle at over 100 meters in altitude. He watched an Imperial shuttle accelerate into the sky from the vicinity of the Jedi Temple. Thinking of Aaron, he felt his stomach flutter. He flew still higher, hoping to catch a glimpse of her near the temple, and he did. She and Darth Malgus bounded across the ruins of the temple, their blades flashing, locking, the speed of their duel so fast Zirid could barely follow their movement. Despite himself, he found the combat beautiful. He slowed the speeder, and T7 beeped a question. Aaron had done what she had come to Coruscant to do. She was facing Malgus, and Zirid had seen what Malgus had done in the temple. The Sith deserved death. But he worried over Aaron's reasons. The line between seeking justice and seeking revenge was thin indeed, but Zirid could see that Aaron had stepped over it. She wanted Malgus dead because she wanted revenge, and there would be no undoing it once it was done. He knew that better than most. He made up his mind and accelerated the speeder to full. Okay. Aaron and Malgus locked blades. "I am more than your match, Sith," she said over the sparks of their joined lightsabers. "Your master was not," Malgus said, grunting, and shoved her with a telekinetic blast of such force that she flew backward and slammed into the rock and rubble. She used the force to cushion the impact, but she still landed on her back, and the impact blew the breath from her lungs. Malgus leapt high into the air, shouting with rage, his blade held high for a killing stroke. She rolled aside as he came down, and his blade sank to its hilt in the rubble of the temple. She leapt to her feet and unleashed a backhand crosscut at his throat. He got his blade free and vertical to parry it, but at the same time she pointed the blade end of Master Zalo's lightsaber at Malgus and activated it. He must have sensed his danger at the last moment, for he slid partially aside. Still, the green line of Master Zalo's blade pierced his armor and side and elicited a snarl of pain and rage. Before Aaron could follow up, Malgus drove an open hand into the side of her face. She was unready for the blow. The force-augmented impact exploded a spark shower in her brain and sent her cartwheeling away from Malgus. She slammed into a rock and landed on her side 10 meters away. Adrenaline pulled her to her feet, though she swayed unsteadily. She spat a mouthful of blood and held both lightsabers at the ready. Malgus stood astride the ruins, his blade sizzling, eyeing the smoking hole in his armor, the furrow in his flesh. Seeing an opportunity, she did not hesitate. Using the Force to guide it, she hurled Master Zalo's lightsaber at Malgus. The blade cut a glittering green arc through the air as it spun, end over end, toward Malgus's head. Despite his wound, the Sith slapped aside Aaron's force hold on the blade and snatched it out of the air as quick as a sand viper. He deactivated the blade, held the hilt in his hand, studied it. He looked up and saw and over at Aaron, his eyes burning. She imagined him smiling under his respirator. This weapon did not avail him, and it will not avail you. The sound of an engine pulled Aaron's head around. She whirled, her blade ready, and saw the Armin speeder roaring out of the sky like a comet. Zirrid in the driver's seat. T7 sat in the rear. He came in too hard, and the thrusters could not completely stop the speeder from slamming into the ruins. Metal creaked. Dust flew up. "Aaron," Zirrid called. "Get in." Zirrid looked past her to Malgus, seeming to consider unloading a blaster shot, but thought better of it. "Come on, Aaron," Zirrid shouted, and T7 backed him up with an urgent whistle. "Please, you said you would help me." She hesitated. Malgus looked at her, brandished Master Zalo's hilt, a taunt to keep her there. She made her decision. She wanted to efface the smugness she'd heard in his tone, to see in his eyes what she had seen in Master Zalo's. Killing him was not enough. She wanted to see him in pain. She just had to figure out how to do it. She leapt high into the air and landed beside Zirrid in the speeder. "Death is too easy, Sith," she called to Malgus, the venom in her tone surprising even to her. "I'm going to hurt you first." The words left a bad taste in her mouth. She felt Zirrid's eyes on her and dared not look him in the face. Malgus, too, seemed almost puzzled, to judge from his furrowed brow and the tilt of his head. "Go," she said. Zirrid accelerated and started to turn the speeder. Anger went forth from Malgus. He reactivated Master Zalo's blade and hurled it after them. Zirrid tried to wheel out of the way, but the blade curled and kept coming at them. T7 beeped in alarm. Aaron watched the weapon spin, felt it, and before it reached the speeder, she reached out with the force and snatched it from Malgus's mental grasp. The weapon turned upward over the speeder and descended hilt first into her hand as Zirrid rose into the night sky and sped away. She deactivated it. She looked back one last time to see Malgus standing atop the ruined temple, his blade in hand, his cape fluttering in the wind. He looked like a victorious conqueror, and she hated him. Zirrid flew low and fast through Coruscant's streets, wheeling around buildings, careering down... I don't know why they use careering down alleys, descending into the lower levels as he went. Soon the sky was lost to the density of structures above them. They were in an industrial underworld, a series of metal and duracrete tunnels that covered the entire planet. "Anyone following?" he said. Aaron did not answer. She sat in the passenger seat and stared at her master's lightsaber hilt as if she'd never seen it before. "Aaron, is anyone following?" "No," she said, but did not look back. Zirrid shot a glance behind them, above them, and saw no one. He let himself breathe easier. "Blast, Aaron, what were you doing?" She answered in a tone as mechanical as a protocol droid's. "What I came here to do, Zirrid. Facing Malgus. What were you doing?" "Helping you." "I didn't need help." "No?" He stared at her across the speeder's compartment. "No." Zirrid thought otherwise. "Why'd you get in the speeder, Aaron?" "I didn't want you to get hurt, and I said I would help you get off planet." A lie, Zirid said. Why not just stay there and finish it? She looked away from him as she answered, Because. Because? Because killing him is not enough, she blurted. I want to hurt him. She hooked her master's lightsaber hilt to her belt and looked over at Zirid. I want to hurt him like he hurt me, like he hurt Master Zallo before he died. Aaron, I don't have to be an empath to feel your ambivalence. Revenge? She raised a hand to cut him off. I do not want to hear it, Zirid. He said it anyway. He owed her as much. This doesn't sound much like you. We haven't seen each other in years, she snapped. What do you know about me? The sharp tone cut him. Not as much as I thought, it seems. For a time, silence sat between them like a wall. Oh, God. I thought I was almost done. Okay, 4 more pages to go. I hired on with the exchange for a good reason, I thought. To provide a good life for my daughter. Zirid, just listen, Aaron. He took a breath to calm himself. And that one decision, that seemed so right, led to me running weapons and then to running spice. One decision, Aaron. One act. She shook her head. This isn't like that, Zirid. I know what I'm doing. He wasn't so sure, but decided not to press further. He changed the subject. I think I can get us into the spaceport. There are ships there. From Valor and Imperial troopers, but I have a plan. Without looking at him, she reached across the seat and touched his hand, just for a moment. I'm sorry for the way I spoke, Zirid. I'm not... He shook his head. No apologies, Aaron. I know you're hurting. I just don't want you to make it worse for yourself. I know how that can happen. Are you seeing clearly? He felt ridiculous trying to provide an empath of all people with insight into her emotional state. I am, she said, but he heard uncertainty in her tone. In the end, you have to live with yourself. He knew well how difficult that could get. I know, she said. I know. Now, what's your plan? He told her. She listened attentively, nodded when he was done. That should work. T7 can do it? Aaron nodded, and T7 beeped agreement. I'll help you get in and get a ship, Aaron said, but I'm not leaving Coruscant. I figured you'd say that, he said, but in his own mind he had not yet conceded the point. He wrestled with whether to tell her about the Twi'lek. You're holding something back, she said. He rubbed the back of his neck, torn. In the end, he decided he owed her honesty, and he knew he could not make decisions for her. The Twi'lek we saw in the vid at the temple, he trailed off. Aaron grabbed his forearm, squeezed. Tell me, Zirid. He swallowed, feeling complicit in a crime. It wasn't so much harm to the Twi'lek that concerned him as it was harm to Aaron. I saw her at the Liston station. She was there. Aaron's fingernails sank into his skin, but she seemed not to notice. He welcomed the pain. She stared off through the windscreen. He fancied he could see her weighing options in the scale of her mind. He held out hope she would choose the right one. I want to see her, she said. Let's go. That was not the answer Zirid had been hoping to hear. Malgus sat among the ruins, the fallen statues of his ancient foes, and pondered. The night breeze blew cool over his face. He replayed his confrontation with Aaron Lanier. Her power had surprised him. So too the anger that underlay it. The anger he understood, even respected, but he didn't understand how she'd come by it. She had known that he'd killed Master Zallo when they had fought on the ruins, but she had not known when they had first seen each other on the ship-to-ship holo over Coruscant, when Valor had shot down the freighter. He was certain of that. He would have felt the knife point of her rage if she had known then. So she must have learned in the interim that he had killed Master Zallo. Either she'd seen it somehow, a surveillance recording pulled from the rubble, maybe, or she'd interrogated a witness, a survivor who had escaped, or maybe a droid who had crawled out of the destruction. Either way, she now knew the details of the attack. It pleased him that she knew. The destruction of the Jedi Temple was the greatest achievement of his life. He wanted the Jedi, wanted Aaron Lanier, to know it was he who had done it. He who had left the corpses of so many Jedi buried in the rubbled tomb of their one-time temple. But something worried at the edge of his mind. She had not fled on the speeder out of fear. He would have felt that, too. "I am going to hurt you," she said. How could she hurt him? And all at once he knew. She knew the details of the attack on the temple, so she knew Alina had accompanied him. She might even have seen in Malgus's behavior what Lord Adras had seen. His feelings for Alina. She would hurt him the same way Adras and Angrel would try to manipulate him. The realization sent a rush of emotion through him, a rush it took him a moment to recognize as fear. He activated his comm link and tried to raise his lover on their normal frequency. No response. A flutter formed in his stomach. He raised Jard. "Jard, has Alina returned to Valor?" "She's not, my lord," returned Jard. "One of her shuttles has returned, but she was not aboard." A fishhook of fear lodged in Malgus's gut and pulled him to his feet. "When is the last time she checked in?" he asked. "She has not checked in, my lord. Is there cause for concern? Should I send a team to retrieve her?" "No," Malgus said. "I will find her myself." There could be any number of reasons for Alina to be out of contact. She could have simply turned off her comm. But Malgus could not shake the unease he felt. He hailed his personal pilot and summoned the shuttle back to the temple. He knew where Alina and her team had set down, the Liston spaceport. He would look for her there first. That is the end of day 2 and that chapter. So that leaves us day 3, which is, like I said, 2 chapters and the epilogue. So that's where we'll pick up next week and hopefully finish this book. So I will see you then. Is there anybody around that I want to raid? How's my computer doing? I've been having heating and weird issues, so it's not hot right now. So let's see. Vesper's doing something retro. Mr. Blitzer's doing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Let's go see Vesper. We'll see you over there.
My heart is beat. I know the pieces. One is broken, one is beat. Because I have seen the part. I have no sorrows to bother. I didn't have anything to say. Follow your heart. Don't take. If you leave it behind. Someone will bring. I left you my heart. What did you do?
I changed my mind. We're going to Mr. Blitzer. See you there.
Was it you have no answers. Don't know without you. How will I